okay? Because it can be awkward. Let's start with this. According to an incredibly humorous online dictionary, an unwritten rule is defined as such. An unwritten rule is a rule or an agreement that is known by all, yet it is rarely or never spoken. The rule is neither official, nor is it written down. An unwritten rule just is. Unwritten rules exist everywhere. They even exist in churches. And sometimes if someone in the church, most especially the new guy, breaks one of these rules, there will be some answering to do, and it will probably involve pitchforks. I'm aware of this reality, and so as I've been here, I started trying to figure out, okay, what are the unwritten rules of being here at Chai? And I've been trying to figure these out, and I do this because I really love my job, and I really, really, really want to keep it. And so I don't want to break these rules. Now, since I've arrived, I've learned 3 rules so far, 3, and I hope this is it, because I don't want to learn anymore. First, don't ever make fun of the Eagles, especially if your team is worse than the Eagles. Second, don't ever upset Mrs. Joan Lane, ever. How many of you knew Joan Lane? Don't ever upset her. And I'm going to say this in second service and not just saying it to you. Third and most important unwritten rule, I better get to that foyer at the end of service in 3 seconds flat, or I am going to be answering to people. Now, over the past several Sundays, I've stood in the foyer and I've heard all sorts of gracious comments related to the teachings that I've presented. And to be honest, it's been very, very humbling to hear these comments because I really struggle accepting encouragement or affirmation. It's just a personal insecurity that I have. Now, a few weeks back, I had someone come to me after service, and with a straight face, they said, you know what? I really didn't like your sermon. Thanks? Like, what do you say to that? And the person continued, he said, I really didn't like your sermon because I actually had to think. That comment right there is a comment that lights a fire in me. That is why I do what I do. Within churches, sermons, let's be honest, are often those things we least look forward to. Okay? The sermon has simply become that thing before we go to lunch. How many of you have sat in the pews and you're like, please land this plane, because I am hungry. Please land the plane.
Amen.
It's on fire. Yes, it's on fire. We're all perishing. Land it. I want to eat. Within many churches, the sermon, on a serious level, has come to only reinforce what a certain church or a certain group of Christians already believes. There's nothing new that's being said. There's nothing that's being expanded. We believe this doctrine. We hold to this doctrine. We take this approach to certain social issues. We take these stances and we're not moving. We're not going to budge. We're not even going to entertain a larger perspective. Now, are there certain doctrines? And when I say doctrine, I mean a set of standard beliefs. Are there certain doctrines that are very ancient that we need to hold to? Yeah, of course there are. But when doctrine becomes your God, when you are unable to see how God's Spirit is moving in new and fresh ways according to who He is, doctrine has missed its purpose. Doctrine is a wonderful guide. Doctrine, a set of standard beliefs, is a wonderful guide, but oh my goodness, it is a horrible master. When doctrine becomes your God, there is a problem. Brennan Manning says this. Take this into account. Jesus did not die at the hands of muggers, rapists, thugs, or heretics. He fell into the hands of deeply religious people, society's most respected members. Jesus fell into the hands of church people, and He was crucified. Jesus' death was orchestrated by people who knew their doctrine inside and out. Every T crossed, every I dotted. Which leads me to say this. Sermons that do not challenge our constricted, limited views of God. If a sermon does not challenge our view of God, then it has not served its purpose. If a person hits those front doors to leave, and by the time they hit those front doors, they've already resolved the sermon in their mind. The sermon has not served its purpose. Because if we somehow think that we've got God all nailed down, I mean, we've got the market cornered on God, if we believe that Jesus would agree with all of our interpretations of Scripture, if we think that he would take all the social stances we take, man, if we think that Jesus would vote this way, or he would definitely support that political party, if we think we've got the market cornered on God, you know what you really have? You have an idol. You have an idol. You do not have the God of Jesus. Last Sunday, I had a very sweet and a very loving friend come up to me after service. And this is a person I consider to be a very godly woman. And she came up to me, and she stood next to me, and the first words that came out of her mouth were this: I think I've been a Christian for too long. I think I've been a Christian for too long. Now, I'm not exactly sure what she meant by that, but I have a feeling that she encountered or heard something beautifully true that slammed up against and challenged her limited view of who she thought God was. And it's not that she was wrong. It's just that we often hold these limited views of God. And I believe that she heard something true, and it just challenged her to the core. You know what this woman is, though? This woman is a painter. She's a painter. And I'm not saying she's not an actual painter, but she's a painter. And we are all painters. Whether we've been a Christian all our life, or whether we've had little to no engagement with talk of God at all. Since the beginning of our lives, we have all painted. All of us have stood before a blank canvas, and we've painted. We've painted our understanding of who God is, what God is like, and how God relates to us. You and I, all of us, have painted our images of God. And our images of God, your image of God, has been shaped by your life experience. It's been shaped by your engagement or lack of engagement with the Scriptures. Your images of God have been shaped by your family. They have been shaped by your work environment. They have been shaped by the schools you've attended. They have been shaped by the conversations you've had. They've been shaped by your culture that you swim in every single day. We all have these images of God. All of us are painters. And the truth is, we've all been invited to paint, because this type of painting comes natural to us. It's central to our journey. But I would argue that many of us think we're finished. We think we're finished painting. And for some of us, the painting still hangs on the wall. Our image of God still hangs on the wall, but all it's doing now is it's just collecting dust. And we've become so used to that picture in our living room that we just don't even remember the fact that it's there. Some of us have just said, you know what, this just isn't fitting here anymore. And so we've taken it into the basement, and we put it next to that musty-smelling picture of Elvis. And Elvis is a little chubby in this one. And we've just kind of left it in the basement. We've got this image of God, and it's just like, yeah, I don't have time for that anymore, and this just isn't working. To stop painting is tragic. It's tragic because your view of God, and we all have one, whether you are an atheist, an agnostic, a Christian, we all have a view of God, and it's tragic when you stop painting because your view of God shapes how you live. And let's be honest, some of us are just miserable. Let's be honest. Some of us are just stingy. Let's be honest. Some of us are just sick and tired of people who aren't like us. And we just don't even want to be near them. Some of us, we just refuse to give anyone grace. I am not talking to that person. Some of us, we refuse to forgive. We hold these deep, grudges. Some of us, we have this saying, hey, love the sinner but hate the sin. But if you would unearth that, man, there's all sorts of hate going on. I mean, let's be honest. Your view of God shapes how you live. And some of us, we've just stopped. All of us are painters. And so the question then becomes, are you still painting? Or have you stopped? Are you allowing the God of Jesus to shape your image of God? Or are you only allowing life experiences, conversations, and biased opinions to shape your image of God? Are you still painting a God that looks like Jesus? Or do you think you're done? Because you think this whole God thing just isn't for you. Is the image of God, the painting that you have, is it next to that Chevy Elvis? And it's just kind of sitting there, and it's dusty. And it's, how many of you have pictures of Elvis? Come on. None of you have old pictures of Elvis. Wow. Good for you. Yeah, we got one. Yeah, we got one. Yep. When it comes to the God of Jesus, we are never finished painting. And I think Jesus today is reminding us, is calling us to take that painting out of the basement, because he's tired of being next to Elvis. Hey, he's tired of being next to that chubby guy. And so let's take that painting out of the basement and let's start again. Now, at the very forefront of Matthew's gospel, Jesus ascends a mountainside. And he sits down the way a Jewish teacher usually would. And he begins to teach. And this isn't just a random teaching. This is the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is one of the most revolutionary teachings the world has ever heard. And up to this point, Jesus has announced the inbreaking of God's rule and reign. And what he's doing within this sermon is he's revealing what it looks like to live in his kingdom, and what it looks like to live the way of the kingdom. For Matthew, this sermon is like Jesus' inaugural address, except it's a lot warmer than DC, and people actually want to hear it, right? Yeah. People actually want to hear it. This teaching, it would have left listeners in awe. People would have laughed out loud. Jesus was very, very funny. Sometimes we have these very stoic images of Jesus that there was no laughing, there was no fun. People would have laughed out loud at the Sermon on the Mount. But then at the same time, this sermon would have been deeply offensive. And it would have offended people you would least think. It would have offended religious people. It would have offended church people. The people who have perfect doctrine. The morally upright people. Right from the start, this teaching would have slapped people right in the face. And this is how it began. Blessed are the spiritually poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the spiritually poor. Blessed are those who think they're a failure with this whole religion thing. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek and the gentle, all the oppressed, for they will inherit the earth. Next slide. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for things to be made right, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And blessed are you, blessed are all of you, when people persecute you, or denigrate you, or despise you, or tell lies about you on my account. Jesus, you know what he just did? Jesus just walked on stage, dropped an absolute bomb. I mean, this is like Jesus at this point could have just dropped the mic and said, next showing at 6. Next showing at 6, baby. He's obliterated all the boxes labeled doctrine. Jesus, the God of Jesus, cannot be contained. Jesus does not start with doctrine. Hey, these are the right things you need to believe. Hey, this is the way you need to live. Jesus starts with this. You. All you that are down and out. All you who've had their dreams crushed. All you who have been pushed aside and forgotten and have longed for things to be made right. All of you who have been hurt. All of you who have grown weary, who feel like failures. All of you all you who think that God wants nothing to do with you. Guess what? God's blessing and favor is already upon you. And you are more than welcome to enter God's kingdom. Do you see how much of a slap in the face that this would have been to deeply religious people? Hey, you're a failure. You don't pray, you don't fast, you don't give. Your sex life is way out of whack. You are not living, guess what? Blessed are you. God's favor already rests on you. Man, let's be honest, some of us, we just don't like that. I once attended a luncheon that was hosted by this area ministerial association. And wherever there's free food, I'm usually there. And so we go. And I'm actually there with my wife because at that time she was the director of a nonprofit. So we go, and there's probably about 25, 30 people there. There's all sorts of executive directors from nonprofits. There's area pastors. I think I'm the youngest guy that's there. And so what happened was we all sat down, we had lunch together, then there was this official welcome, and then we started asking for prayer requests because we were going to pray. First prayer request. Gripe-filled prayer request about the state of our nation and the homosexual community that was pushing their agenda on the Christians and how the church needed to fight back. That's the first one. Second prayer request. A man that had been long involved in overseas work in Africa. He began to talk about all the Islamic terrorists that were coming against him and fighting against the work he did. And he kept going. And he made it sound like every single Muslim, people that he didn't even know, that they were all terrorists. Every single one of them. Third prayer request. A pastor began to speak about their church hosting this open mic night. And they were like, yeah, we've been inviting all these people to come and share their poetry, the music they've written. I love the idea. I love the idea until he said, yeah, but we don't allow rap. And he kept going. He went on for about 3 minutes about how they don't allow rap. And I remember sitting in my seat, and I don't hide my frustration well. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, that's all we got. That's what it means to follow Jesus. How about we pray about loving people that we disagree with? Come on now. Next story. A couple years ago, I had just finished teaching to a large group of students, a large group of young people. And when I finished teaching, I remember very vividly, I was speaking about the grace of God. That is a very central topic to my life. And when I finished, very powerful night, I had a young girl come up to me. Very gothic looking, earrings, all sorts of jazz. I loved it. She came up. She stood next to me awkwardly. She looked at my face and she said, I don't believe a thing you said. All right, I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear when you've given your heart and soul to a teaching. And so I said, that's okay. I'm glad you're here. Now, a few months later, she confessed to me she had been raped by her brother when she was young. And she could not understand why the God that I spoke about would stand by and allow that to happen. Then she did something next. To kind of numb that pain, you know what she was doing? She was cutting herself. So she pulled her sleeve back, and she revealed all these cuts on her arm. Third story, I'm at a youth camp. The speaker just gets finished. The worship has just ended. Everyone has left except one of my students, this young boy. He's an 8th grader. And he's hunched over, and I don't know if he's praying, but I just stuck around because I don't know what's going on with him. And I walk over to him, and he stands up, and he's got tears just streaming from his eyes. And I know exactly why he's crying. His dad bailed on him and his family about 3 months ago. And I put my arms on his shoulders, and I said, "You were wrong. That was terrible. That wasn't right. That wasn't fair. But you need to know something. God is not like your father. He is not going to bail on you." All of these people are painters. And I would argue that these are all people who have stopped painting. Or they have taken their images of God and they put them in the basement. Because they no longer know what to do with it. They don't want to do anything with it. Because within these stories, we are seeing people who have painted and settled with images of God that are radically different from the image of God Jesus paints when he gives his Sermon on the Mount. Radically different. Are you with me? Exodus chapter 3, starting with verse 1. Please turn with me. It'd be good to pick up a Bible for those of you who are maybe new to us. Exodus chapter 3, starting with verse 1. This is a very strange story. And if you scratch your head while reading this story, well, you're joining a long line of head scratchers. Scholars and rabbis have pored over this text for centuries. Verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. And so Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. Why the bush does not burn up. And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." And God said, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." And then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And then the Lord said, "I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt, and I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them. I have come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, and I am sending you to Pharaoh, the most powerful man in all of the world. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you, that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." And Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites, and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you." And they asked me, "What is his name?" Then what am I going to say? And God said to Moses, "I am who I am. And this is what you are to say to the Israelites: I am has sent me to you." And God also said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. And this is my name forever. I am. the name you shall call me from generation to generation. Now, Jesus and the Jews of his day would have been deeply familiar with this story. They would have been very familiar with the story that spoke of Israel's brutal slavery in Egypt. And they would have celebrated and remembered it every single year at the festival of Passover. Now, up to this point in our story, God has not revealed his name. He has spoken to Isaac, he has spoken to Abraham, he has spoken to Jacob, but now he's revealed his name. It was already a radical concept that God spoke to human beings, because no God in the ancient world ever did that. Now, God reveals his name. And names were huge in the ancient world. It wasn't just a label that attached itself to a person. Hey, Larry. It wasn't just a name. In the ancient world, names spoke of a person's character, integrity, what they had done during their life. So when you heard a name, it wasn't, hey, that guy's name is Larry. It was, I know what Larry is all about. I'm just picking Larry. Larry, I know what Larry's all about. I know his family history. I know what he's done and what he's been involved in. Now, God gives his name. And this speaks to the core of who God is. Gods in the ancient world never revealed their names, ever. They were always given names by people. But this God stands apart and offers his name. And when God gives Moses his name, this is not a label. It's not a label. God is doing something that no other God in the history of civilization has ever done. And when he gives him his name, he's essentially extending to him an invitation. And name was a very private gesture. It was an invitation to know someone intimately, to know someone very closely. And so God is inviting Moses into a relationship, and not just any relationship. When Moses asked God his name, has anybody ever wondered or thought, man, it's almost like God sidesteps the question. God, what's your name? I am who I am. Which leaves us, what in the world does that mean? I am who I am. Translation is this, Moses, I am the source of everything. I am the source of everything you see. I am the God who lights up the show. I am the God who stands apart from every other God the world has ever known. I am the God who cannot be contained. Now, if you back up a bit, do you remember when Moses says to God, who am I? That I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. You remember that part? And God's only response was this, I'll be with you. I'll be with you. At the very core of who God is a God who wants us to know him intimately. And the only way you know God intimately is by journeying with him. It's by painting. And so if you put your images of God, your paintings in the basement next to Elvis, I believe God is calling you to bring them out. Moses is being invited to paint, and the only way he can begin to paint again is by standing in front of the most powerful man in the world and saying, hey, guess what? Your time is up, and God is going to rescue his people. That is the